In the heart of Africa, where the sun kisses the land with golden warmth and the ocean sings to the shores, there lived a young woman named Amara. She had the spirit of a warrior and the heart of a queen, but life had never been kind to her. She was born into a house where love was a privilege, not a right. Her father had married again after her mother's passing, and from that moment, Amara became a shadow in her own home. Tonight, the family gathered around a grand table, the scent of grilled fish and spicy jollof rice filling the air. Laughter echoed through the walls, but beneath the surface, something sinister lurked. Amara, a 24-year-old law student, sat quietly, unaware that this night would shatter her world. Her stepmother, Adesina, a woman with a heart as cold as steel, stood up slowly. The gold bangles on her wrist jingled as she tapped her glass. A cruel smile curled on her lips as she scanned the room, her gaze finally settling on Amara. "The wedding is in 2 weeks," she announced, her voice smooth, deliberate. She let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. "But it won't be Amara's." The room fell silent. Amara felt the air thicken, pressing against her chest. She turned to Niazi, her fiancé, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted, but he didn't look at her. His head was lowered, his hands clenched into fists on the table. Adesina's lips curled into a smirk as she placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Niazi and Zuberi are getting married. Amara's breath hitched. The world tilted beneath her feet. Zuberi, her stepsister, beamed like a queen receiving her crown. She reached out, lacing her fingers with Niazi's, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "It was meant to be," she said sweetly, though her smile was sharp, taunting. The room erupted in celebration. Glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, and toasts were made in honor of the new couple. No one looked at Amara. No one acknowledged the betrayal burning through her veins like fire. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to sit still, to breathe. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. If this was their victory, she would not let them see her defeat. Instead, she pressed her nails into her palm and whispered to herself, "I will rise." From the moment Adesina stepped into Amara's life, she made sure the girl knew she was unwanted. She never hid her disdain, never softened her sharp words. Amara was the daughter of the first wife, a reminder of a past Adesina wanted erased. She saw Amara's quiet strength, her beauty, her intelligence, and she despised it. She wanted her own daughter, Zuberi, to shine, to have everything, and for that to happen, Amara had to be pushed aside. For years, Adesina worked to make Amara feel small. She controlled the household, ensuring Amara always got the least: old clothes, the smallest portions, the coldest stares. But Amara endured, her silence a quiet defiance. And when she got engaged to Niazi, Adesina saw her worst fear coming true. Amara was about to win. Niazi was everything Adesina wanted for Zuberi: handsome, successful, the heir to a wealthy family's business. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. When Amara and Niazi fell in love, Adesina's rage simmered beneath the surface, hidden behind false smiles. She watched them closely, waiting for her moment to strike. That moment came when Niazi's business hit a rough patch. His once thriving investments were failing, and he was struggling to hold things together. But he hid it well, playing the part of a successful businessman while secretly drowning in debt. Adesina saw the cracks before anyone else, and she saw an opportunity. She began whispering in Niazi's ear, planting doubts like seeds. She spoke of power, of influence, of a future far greater than what Amara could offer. "A marriage should be more than just love," she told him one evening, her voice smooth like honey. "It should be strategic. Amara is respectable, yes, but what does she bring to the table? Zuberi, on the other hand, comes with connections, with status, with me." Niazi hesitated at first. He loved Amara, or at least, he believed he did, but Adesina was relentless. She fed him promises, told him that marrying Zuberi would secure his future, that Amara would understand. And when she saw his resistance falter, she went further. One night, she orchestrated a scene, a carefully planned deception. She made sure Niazi overheard a conversation, a fabricated tale about Amara hesitating, about her not being sure if she truly wanted to marry him. She made sure it sounded convincing, laced with just enough truth to be believable. And when Niazi confronted Amara, confused and angry, Adesina stood back and watched as everything crumbled. Amara had no idea what was happening. One day, she was planning a future with the man she loved, and the next, He was distant, cold. The warmth in his eyes faded, replaced by doubt. And then came the final blow, the family dinner where her engagement was stolen from her in front of everyone. As the toasts were made, as Zuberi beamed beside Niazi, Adesina watched Amara's face, waiting for the breakdown, but it never came. Amara did not scream, she did not cry, she did not beg. She simply sat there, her expression unreadable, her hands resting lightly in her lap. And in that moment, Adesina felt a strange unease. Amara stood up, her movements graceful, controlled. She met Niazi's eyes for the first time since the betrayal, and for a moment, something flickered in his gaze. Regret, uncertainty, but it was too late. Amara turned away, her voice quiet but firm. "Enjoy your celebration." She walked out, her back straight, her steps steady. Lomé was alive with gossip. Markets, salons, university halls, everywhere Amara went, whispers followed. Zuberi and Niazi's engagement was the talk of the city. It wasn't just about love, it was about power, about wealth, about betrayal. And Amara was at the center of it all, though she remained silent. People expected a reaction, tears, outrage, a fight, but she gave them nothing. She walked through the streets with her head high, as if she felt nothing at all. But at night, when the world was quiet, the truth settled deep in her chest, like a heavy stone. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, had been taken from her so easily, or maybe he had never truly been hers to begin with. The thought hurt more than she wanted to admit. Her best friend, Lethabo, wasn't as calm. She stormed into Amara's apartment one evening, eyes blazing. "You're just going to let them do this?" she demanded. "You're going to let them humiliate you like this?" Amara looked up from her books, her voice steady. "What do you want me to do, Lethabo? Beg, cry, chase after a man who was willing to be taken?" Lethabo crossed her arms. "I want you to fight back." A small, bitter smile touched Amara's lips. "Let them celebrate," she said. "Their time will come." She turned her attention back to her studies, but Lethabo wasn't fooled. She saw the way Amara's hands trembled slightly as she held her pen, the way her jaw tightened when she thought no one was looking. The pain was there, buried beneath layers of control, but Amara refused to let it consume her. Instead, she poured herself into her future. She buried her heartbreak under piles of legal books and business plans. She spent hours researching, investing, building something of her own. If love had failed her, she would not fail herself. But while Amara forced herself to move on, Niazi found himself unable to do the same. He told himself he had made the right choice, that marrying Zuberi was the smart decision, the logical one. But logic did little to silence the ache in his chest when he saw Amara from afar. He caught glimpses of her in the university courtyard, in the marketplace, walking along the coastline as the sun set. She never looked lost, never looked broken, and that unsettled him more than he could explain. He had expected tears. He had expected to see sadness in her eyes, but instead, he saw something else, something stronger, something untouchable. It made him question everything. At night, when he lay beside Zuberi, he found himself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Zuberi had gotten what she wanted, her ring, her status, her victory, but Niazi felt like he had lost something far greater. And worse, he knew he could never get it back, because while he was trapped in a golden cage built on lies, Amara was rising, and she didn't even look back. The grand ballroom shimmered with gold and white, the air thick with the scent of fresh roses and expensive perfume. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, casting a glow over the sea of guests dressed in their finest silks and tailored suits. The wealthiest and most powerful people in Togo had gathered, eager to witness what many called the wedding of the year. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the space, voices humming with admiration. At the center of it all stood Zuberi, glowing with triumph. She wore a wedding gown designed in Paris, embroidered with delicate pearls that sparkled under the lights. Every step she took was calculated, her posture screaming confidence. She was no longer just another woman in the crowd. She was the chosen one, the woman who had secured the wealthiest man in the city, the woman who had won. Amara was not there. Her name had been erased from every conversation, every memory, as if she had never existed. But Zuberi would not let her be forgotten so easily. She took every opportunity to make sure people knew she had taken what was once Amara's. She laughed a little louder when someone praised Niazi. She leaned into him, whispering words meant only for his ears. but loud enough for others to catch. She wanted to make sure that if Amara was listening from the shadows, she would hear every word. Adesina moved through the crowd like a queen, basking in the admiration of those who envied her. A woman's greatest achievement, she declared, raising her glass high, is securing a strong future. And my Zuberi, she has done just that. She accepted the compliments as if they were her own, smiling at the whispers of approval. She had orchestrated this moment, and now she would enjoy every second of it. At the altar, Niazi stood stiffly, his hands cold and clammy. His face was unreadable, his lips stretched into a tight smile. The priest spoke, but the words blurred into meaningless sounds. The guests waited eagerly, expecting to see a man overflowing with joy. But Niazi felt only dread. Zuberi reached for his hand, squeezing it lightly. Her touch meant to be reassuring, but it did nothing to stop the storm inside him. His fingers trembled as he picked up the wedding ring, slipping it onto Zuberi's finger. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Zuberi lifted her chin, basking in the moment. She had done it. She had secured a future of wealth, luxury, and power. But Niazi knew the truth. The empire they thought he owned was already collapsing. His businesses were drowning in debt, his assets tied up in legal battles. The bank accounts that had once overflowed with money were now nearly empty. The luxury cars, the penthouses, the illusion of power, everything was borrowed, built on a foundation that was already cracking. Adesina and Zuberi hadn't bothered to check. They had seen the surface, the glittering gold, and assumed it was real. They had pushed Amara aside, believing they had won the ultimate prize, but what they had taken was nothing more than a beautifully wrapped disaster. As the reception began, Zuberi and Niazi sat at the head of the table, receiving endless congratulations. Zuberi beamed as guests showered her with praise. "You've truly found the perfect husband," one woman gushed. "A man of great wealth and influence." Niazi forced a smile, nodding politely, but inside, his chest tightened. He had wanted to tell Zuberi the truth before the wedding, but fear held him back. He had convinced himself that he could fix everything, that he could rebuild what he had lost. But now, as he watched the people around him celebrate a future that did not exist, he realized there was no escape. Zuberi turned to him, her eyes shining with excitement. "Can you believe it?" she whispered. "We are finally here." He swallowed hard, forcing a chuckle. Yes, finally. But deep down, he knew this wasn't a celebration. This was the beginning of a nightmare. The night of the wedding glittered with luxury, but beneath the golden chandeliers and flowing champagne, Niazi felt a noose tightening around his neck. Every smile he forced, every congratulatory handshake he accepted, felt like another shovel of dirt burying him deeper in a grave of lies. The world saw him as the wealthy businessman who had secured a beautiful young bride. Only he knew the truth. He was drowning, and no one could save him. Months ago, his empire had begun to crumble. Bad investments, risky deals, and the weight of his own ambition had turned his fortune into dust. The businesses that once flourished under his name had quietly collapsed, one after another. He had spent months patching the cracks, taking loans upon loans, convincing himself that with time he could fix everything. But debt was a hungry beast, and it had grown too large to tame. He had almost told Zuberi, he had almost told Adesina, but each time their arrogance made him bite his tongue. They were too busy celebrating their victory, too eager to flaunt their new status. Adesina paraded around the wedding, laughing with high society guests, praising her daughter's choice as if she had personally built his fortune. "A man of great power," she called him, her voice dripping with pride. A future too bright to be measured, if only she knew. Zuberi, lost in her own fantasy, never questioned the lavish gifts, the expensive rings, the grand wedding. She wanted a fairy tale, and Niazi had given her one. He had borrowed and borrowed, stacking one lie on top of another, until the weight of them became unbearable. As the wedding night stretched on, Niazi felt the walls closing in. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Another call from a creditor. He ignored it. He had been ignoring them for weeks, but soon he would have no choice. They were coming. And when they did, there would be nowhere left to hide. The honeymoon suite was draped in silk, candles flickering in the dim light. Zuberi twirled in her gown, a queen admiring her kingdom. "Can you believe this?" she whispered, running her fingers over the diamond necklace around her throat. "This is just the beginning, Niazi. Our life will be nothing but luxury." He could barely look at her. His silence made her pause. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice softer now. "You haven't smiled once since we left the reception." He hesitated, the words at the tip of his tongue. He wanted to tell her. He wanted to rip off the mask and let her see what she had really married. A man not of power, but of ruin. Instead, he swallowed the truth. "I'm just tired," he murmured, forcing a small smile. She grinned, stepping closer. "Then rest, my love. Tomorrow we begin our new life. Tomorrow." By tomorrow, the calls would turn into threats. The whispered warnings would become public shame. The life Zuberi and Adesina thought they had secured would shatter before their eyes. Niazi lay awake long after Zuberi had fallen asleep. The moonlight cut through the curtains, casting shadows across the room. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. How much time did he have? A week, a few days, perhaps even less. He had built a kingdom out of illusions, and now it was all coming down. The illusion of wealth didn't last long. Just weeks after the grand wedding, reality came crashing down like a storm that had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The mansion that Zuberi flaunted as her own was no longer theirs. The luxury cars that once lined the driveway vanished overnight. The expensive jewelry, designer dresses, and extravagant lifestyle, everything disappeared, one piece at a time. Zuberi woke up one morning to an eviction notice nailed to the front gate. At first, she laughed, thinking it was some mistake. But as she stepped outside, she saw men in suits swarming the property, boxing up furniture, seizing assets. "Stop!" she screamed, running towards them. "This is my house, you can't do this!" One of the men barely glanced at her before handing over a thick folder filled with legal documents. "This house was never yours," he said coldly. "It belonged to the bank, and now the bank is taking it back." Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Everything was in black and white. The debts, the unpaid loans, the lawsuits piling up one after another. It was all real. The wealth her mother had promised her was nothing but an illusion. Furious and humiliated, she stormed back inside, her voice echoing through the emptying halls. "Niazi!" she screamed. "Where is he? Where is my husband?" She found him in the study, his head buried in his hands, surrounded by letters demanding payments he could never make. "You lied to me," she hissed, throwing the eviction notice at him. "You made me believe we had everything, and now we have nothing." Niazi didn't lift his head. He didn't have the strength to fight back. "I never lied," he murmured. "You and your mother never asked." His words hit her like a slap. She had never asked. She had assumed. She had been so desperate to have a life better than Amara's that she had never stopped to question the truth. Zuberi ran to her mother, sobbing, her voice shaking with anger. "You married me to a broke man. You ruined my life." Adesina, who had once carried herself with arrogance and pride, stood frozen, her face pale. She had been so blinded by the illusion of wealth that she never bothered to check the truth. Now, she was left with nothing but shame. Meanwhile, far from the chaos, Amara sat at a small cafe, sipping tea as she watched the world unfold. She had heard the rumors, seen the headlines, and witnessed the disgrace that had fallen upon the people who once mocked her. She felt no anger, no satisfaction, just silence. The people who had betrayed her were now facing the consequences of their greed, and she had already moved on. While they were busy celebrating their stolen victory, Amara was quietly building something far greater. She had learned long ago that revenge was not found in words or anger, it was found in success. The betrayal had nearly broken her, but she refused to stay down. She buried herself in her studies, earning her law degree with distinction. But she didn't stop there. She had seen how power worked in the world, how wealth could be an illusion, and she was determined to create something real. With every coin she had saved, she invested wisely: real estate, legal consulting, strategic partnerships. While her stepmother and stepsister were lost in their false paradise, she was securing her future. She built a legal firm specializing in corporate law, helping struggling businesses navigate financial crises. Investors took notice of her sharp mind and fearless ambition. She became known for her ability to turn failing ventures into thriving enterprises. And then, as fate would have it, the downfall of Niazi became the talk of the city. The once admired businessman was nothing more than a fraud, drowning in debts he could no longer hide. The wedding that was supposed to secure Zuberi's future had instead sealed her destruction. Whispers spread through the elite circles of Togo. People who once toasted to Adesina's brilliant matchmaking now shook their heads in disbelief. The wrong sister was chosen. they murmured. The real queen was cast aside. Amara never sought their approval. She didn't need their pity or their regret. She had built her own empire, on her own terms, and now she walked through the same city that once humiliated her, not as a victim, but as a woman who had risen above them all. Niazi had always been a man of pride. He once walked with the confidence of someone who owned the world, wearing expensive suits, driving luxury cars, and hosting extravagant parties. But now, he was a shadow of that man. His once polished shoes were scuffed, his tailored suit hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes, once filled with arrogance, were hollow. For weeks, he had been drowning in misery. The creditors had stripped him of everything. The lavish mansion he had promised Zuberi was taken overnight. His businesses, already crumbling before the wedding, had completely collapsed. Even the people who once called him brother in the business world now refused to take his calls. And Zuberi, she was gone. The moment the money disappeared, she had turned her back on him. She had no loyalty, no patience for struggle. But there was one person left in the city, one person he had pushed away but never truly forgotten, Amara. The thought of her haunted him. He saw her face in every sleepless night, heard her voice in every moment of silence. He had once promised her a life of love, but instead, he had betrayed her in the cruelest way. Now he was nothing, and the one woman he had truly loved was thriving without him. He knew where to find her. Amara was no longer the quiet, obedient girl who had swallowed her pain in silence. The city now spoke her name with respect. Her law firm was growing, her investments were flourishing, and her presence was undeniable. When he arrived at her office, the receptionist hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" Niazi shook his head, his hands trembling. "No, but please, tell her it's Niazi." Minutes later, the door opened, and Amara stood before him. She was different, stronger, unshaken. She wore confidence like armor, her tailored suit crisp, her posture straight. There was no trace of the woman he had once abandoned, no sadness in her eyes, no longing, just quiet power. She studied him, arms crossed. "What do you want, Niazi?" He felt a lump in his throat. The words were harder to say than he expected. "I was a fool," he finally admitted. "I let them control me. I let greed blind me. But I swear, Amara, I never stopped loving you." She said nothing, just watching him with the same unreadable expression. He took a step closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "I made the worst mistake of my life. I should have fought for you. I should have trusted my heart, but I was weak. And now, I have nothing left but the truth." His voice broke. "The truth is, I still love you. I always did." Amara tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her silence suffocating. Then, finally, she spoke. "Love that can be stolen so easily is not love at all." Her words cut deeper than any knife. Niazi's breath caught. He had hoped, prayed, for even the slightest chance at redemption. But standing before her now, he realized something devastating. She was done with him. Amara took one last look at the man who had once meant everything to her, and then, with the grace of someone who had already won, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, broken. The whispers had spread across the city like wildfire. The mighty Adesina and her precious daughter Zuberi had fallen from grace. The once feared woman who schemed her way through life now found herself drowning in debt. The grand lifestyle she had fought so hard to secure was slipping through her fingers like sand. The luxurious home, sold. The designer clothes, pawned. The elite friends, now distant strangers. Zuberi, who once flaunted her wealth and mocked Amara, now avoided public places, terrified of the pitying looks and hushed conversations. The wedding that was supposed to be her fairy tale ending had become a curse. Niazi had left her with nothing but shame and legal battle. With nowhere else to turn, Adesina swallowed her pride and did what she never thought she'd have to do. She reached out to Amara. They arrived at her office unannounced, desperation evident in their worn-out clothes and trembling hands. The same office they had once laughed at, calling her dreams childish. "Amara, please," Adesina started, forcing a smile that no longer carried its usual malice. "We need your help." Zuberi clutched her purse tightly, unable to meet Amara's gaze. The humiliation was too much, but she had no choice. Amara leaned back in her chair, calm and composed. She took in the sight of the two women who had once stolen everything from her, but now they were the ones begging. She smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of understanding. "Help," she repeated. "Funny. I don't remember you helping me when I needed you." Adesina's face tightened. but she forced a laugh. We were family. Surely you wouldn't let us suffer like this. Amara leaned forward, her voice steady. Family? That's an interesting word coming from you. You never saw me as family. You saw me as an obstacle. And now, you want my money to fix the mess you created. Silence filled the room. Zuberi's hands curled into fists. I was tricked too. Niazi lied to us all. It's not my fault. Amara raised a brow. Not your fault. You didn't care about the truth when you took my place at that wedding. You wanted the riches, the status. You enjoyed every moment of my humiliation. And now you want my sympathy. Adesina's desperation turned to frustration. We're not asking for much. Just a small loan. Amara stood up, signaling the conversation was over. I don't do charity work for thieves. Adesina's face twisted in anger, but she held her tongue. There was nothing left to say. Later that evening, the most prestigious business gala of the year was held at the grandest hotel in Lomé. The city's most powerful entrepreneurs and investors gathered to celebrate success, innovation, and leadership. At the center of it all stood Amara. She was the guest of honor. Dressed in an elegant white gown, she took the stage, surrounded by people who admired her strength, her intelligence, her unstoppable rise. The same city that once whispered about her betrayal now whispered about her victory. In the crowd, lurking in the shadows, stood Adesina and Zuberi. They had managed to sneak in, hoping to find a wealthy investor who might take pity on them, but no one even glanced in their direction. They watched in silence as Amara addressed the audience. She spoke of resilience, of self-worth, of the power of building something with one's own hands. And then, with a knowing smile, she ended with words that would echo in their minds. A queen does not beg for a throne, she builds her own. The audience erupted in applause. And in that moment, Adesina and Zuberi realized the truth they had ignored for too long. What is stolen never lasts. Wealth without wisdom is a ticking time bomb, and the one they underestimated had risen higher than they ever could. Amara didn't need revenge. Success was her greatest payback. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful tales.